In this episode, I interview Debra Niemann, who is a goat farmer. Well, she's more than just a goat farmer, but she raises goats. And I love her story. This is one of my most favorite interviews, I think, because it's so different, so unusual from the type of people I normally have on. Deborah's 57, and at age 39, she decided to move after contemplating it for a long time, 9 years. She decided to move from the suburbs to a farm, knowing nothing about farming, only really with two goals: to make sure her kids were raised with a better work ethic than she felt they were getting in the suburbia life, and to make their own food, to be more, self-sustaining. It was right after 9/11, and she has had up to 22 goats. She also has chickens. She has sheep. She has geese, or maybe one goose now. But I loved hearing her story. I loved hearing her attitude about how much she's learned, and she never really saw things. Everything was always just like a tool for moving forward. Her lessons were a tool for moving forward. She never gave up, and she is living the life she loves, and she's has 6 books, and she is helping people who, like the old her, she said there wasn't a book for how to start from scratch and without knowing anything. And she makes so many things from goat milk. She makes all her dairy products are come from goat milk. So that's interesting as well. So I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed meeting Deborah, hearing her story and having this conversation. She and I met in a brand new group I joined, and she has a podcast as well, so I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. But she is another podcaster, and so I heard her story, and I was like, and I knew how old she was. I knew she was near my age, and I was like, you would be perfect as a guest on my podcast. So enjoy, and let me know. Leave a review if you like it, and make sure to subscribe. Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. And today, my guest is Debra Niemann. Debra has a goat farm. I think you're the first farmer that I've had, Debra, and I love goats. They are the cutest little animals, and they're so funny and spunky. So I can't wait to learn about how you moved. Like, now you told me it's like 18 years ago, from the suburbs to the country without having a clue of what you were doing. And so you said when you submitted your background, you said you had 2 cats and a poodle. And I would say those aren't even country pets, So I love that. So you had no experience and you made a lot of mistakes. And so I thought, you're just so perfect for my podcast, because I love talking about, even though you were 39 when you started, that's midlife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love for you to introduce yourself and just start with what made you decide to uproot and move. Like, I think you said 50 miles from where you were. You wasn't much, like, it was modem internet at the time. So yeah, welcome.
Thanks. It's really great to be here. We decided, so actually it was kind of a really long journey. So many people say, oh, you're living my dream. And I say, don't give up, because we actually talked about it for 9 years before we moved to the country. There were so many things that we just didn't like about living in the city. It felt really fake to me, like my children didn't have real chores. If you don't clean your room or make your bed, big deal. What happens, if you don't feed the cat, not a big deal, right? Somebody's going to feed the cat. Somebody's going to
So
feed
what
the
was your
dog.
background? I mean, out of curiosity, did you grow up on a farm? You didn't, because you
Uh-uh.
had no experience. So
No.
what made you think that, like, did you grow up in suburbia?
I grew up in a small town in Texas, and my grandparents actually had a farm, and we got to visit a few times. And every time we visited when I was a little girl, I just loved it. I was always begging my mother to let me stay longer, and she wouldn't. And in fact, like, I just heard really negative things about farmers all the time. Her attitude was, only people who are too dumb to do anything else will stay on the farm. And that's why
Oh,
she left and she wanted nothing to do with it. So I think it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know why, even though I was hearing all this negative stuff, I still like, I remember one time that I did get to stay with my grandma for a couple days. Like, we made butter out of her, the cream from her cow. And, I like to help collect the eggs and stuff like that.
yeah,
And
there's something inside of you that connected with that. I had,
yeah,
you made me realize I had an aunt and uncle who had a farm and they lived a couple of hours away. And I remember visiting them once. It's so great. You brought this memory back to me. And you know what I remember? They had a pump for water. They had like, you would go out and pump the water, and
wow.
they had a turtle that like grabbed onto my toe, and it was like a big scene because he wouldn't let go of my toe. So that's, yeah, I loved
Oh,
visiting them though.
wow.
I loved their dogs and
Mhm.
just the drive there. That's a really wonderful memory I just got.
Yeah. And I had never heard about the connection between your diet and your health until I got pregnant the first time. And that's when I started hearing, like, oh, if you have a better diet, you'll be healthier, which sounds crazy. It feels like everybody knows that now, but I hadn't heard that back then. And I knew I was sick all the time as a child. So it was really interesting to me that maybe if my children had a better diet, they would not be sick all the time. And so I started learning more about the connection between your diet and your health, and we started eating better. And I was really super upset when I read the label on my blueberry muffins and discovered that there were no blueberries in there
Oh
because
no. Well, and
I
then that's what's interesting is you have a goat farm, but there was no goats in your head. You were more about wanting to like live on, like make your own food type of, yeah.
yeah, that was the original goal. The original goal was we were just going to move to the country so we could grow our own food organically. And we got the goats because I really loved goat cheese. And it was like $1 an ounce, in the store. So it was not something that I bought very often. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just get a couple goats so I can make goat cheese. And I
I,
had no
it's
idea.
funny. Goat cheese is one of those cheeses. It's really, really strong. And I recently, well, it was like a year ago, I started doing this cleanse, and one of the things that they have, one of the items is you put goat cheese in your salad, but then you put warm roasted vegetables in it, and it melts the goat cheese. And it was so amazing, and you don't even need all that dressing on it, and it converted me to loving goat cheese. It's just like if you mix it with the right things, it's not so strong, I think. So you probably
Mhm.
have all kinds of goat cheese recipes.
Yep, and all kinds of tips and everything. And I had no idea that you could even do anything else with goat milk. But after I got a book to learn how to make the goat cheese, then I discovered, like, oh my gosh, you can make all kinds of different stuff with it. So we make cheddar, Gouda, feta, ice cream, sour cream, buttermilk, basically, any kind of a dairy product that you've ever had,
Well, you
we
just
make
said you
it.
were making yogurt before we jumped on here, so that's another
Mhm.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And you have a
Yeah.
video, I guess, on that. We should put that in the show notes, so some people, we can send people to your video about making goat cheese. So yeah, so how did goats enter the picture? You said you started with 2, now you have 20 or maybe even more, I don't know. And
Oh,
then you
yeah.
got into like being your own vet? Like,
Not exactly, but the thing is, there are not a lot of vets in the US who are experienced with goats. And so if I have a problem, I have to go 2 hours to the University of Illinois vet clinic, which means I wound up learning how to do a lot of stuff myself. So that really about the only time that I go there is like if I need their diagnostics, like if I can't figure out what's going wrong and we need to do some lab work, or if a goat needs a procedure that requires anesthesia, because you can't get anesthesia as a lay person. So yeah, I wound up learning to do a lot with the
so
goats.
do you do organic stuff? Is all your cheese and all that kind of stuff organic or not? Because I had heard from a vet that a lot of times farms that are organic, it's not humane sometimes with what they do with animals, and I didn't understand that.
Oh, that's a really, really bad rumor that is not true.
Good.
The organic standards specifically state that you are not allowed to withhold medication from an animal to maintain your organic status. I hate that because I see people saying that, and that's just not true.
I'm so glad
Um,
we put that out there and people know now.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is not true at all. And so the reason that like some goat, like I know one goat farm that does cheese and stuff, and the reason that they're not organic is because you are inevitably going to have, like, especially like they have over 100 goats. Like it's inevitable that they're going to have a goat that's going to need an antibiotic or something after they have to intervene in a birth or something like that. And so that goat has to be taken off of organic production for a year. And so if you're a small farm, like you can't have a separate herd over here with 2 or 3 goats out of production, or heaven help you, like hopefully it doesn't wind up being, 5 or 10 one year, because that could be a significant part of your income that you would basically just have to take that goat out of production for a year. If you had a conventional farm right next door, you could just put those goats over there, during that year and be selling their milk and cheese as conventional. But that's the main reason that you don't see some small farms go organic, is because they're concerned that it could wind up being a financial burden for them if they have a bad year.
Yeah. So you're an author, you're a goat farmer, herder, I'm sure. You have you also grow your own food. So tell me what a day in the life of Deborah is like. Do you get up like before the sun comes up
No,
or no? Yeah. So it's not.
we have never gotten up before the sun. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. There have been times like when my daughters were involved in stuff and they were going to the local community college. There were some times they would get up, really early to milk the goats before they went to class. But for the most part, the goats don't mind when you come out there to
So you
milk them.
humanly and I'm squeezing my hands like so,
Yeah.
but you humanly milk them. You don't have like, because I know that a lot of farms that produce milk have machines that do that.
hmm We have a machine, but we don't use it that often. Um, the machine is a pain to clean because it's got tubes and stuff that the milk run through. And so you have to scrub those with brushes and all that kind of stuff. And so well, for me, I can easily do 5 or 6 goats by hand. My husband can do 10 by hand. My youngest daughter could milk 20 goats by hand.
And how much
Um,
time does that take?
it's about 5 minutes a goat.
Okay. And that,
So
do you do that once a day, or how much do they produce?
usually we milk twice a day. Sometimes we will drop down to once a day, and like in the late fall, like around this time of year, my husband just dropped down to once a day because their production is lower. Like most of them, they kidded in March and April. So their production is low enough now that they're not walking around with a huge uncomfortable udder.
And
Um,
now you said the internet's great there. We're talking, so it must be really great. But now you can use that time to listen to audiobooks and I'm thinking, gosh, it wouldn't be so bad if I had my phone and my AirPods in to
oh
milk goats. It's
yeah.
probably cathartic in a way. It's like
I listen to audiobooks and podcasts when I milk.
that's wonderful. So you have how many now?
Now we're milking about 16. And that's just the does. We peaked at one point, we were up to 22 milkers. But we don't need that now because like our kids are grown up and stuff, and we can't sell our milk and cheese and stuff because we're not a certified dairy. So we just use it for all of our dairy products. We use it to make goat milk soap. And then some of it gets fed to pigs because we have too much.
So do you have pigs?
Yeah, we do.
And do you have chickens? I want to have my own
Mhm.
eggs. I want to be able to go in my backyard and get the eggs. That's what I want.
Yeah. Chickens are the easiest thing in the world. Like I feel like everybody should have like 3 or 4 chickens in their backyard for eggs.
Do you need a rooster too? or
Nope, you
you don't
don't.
have to have a rooster? Yeah.
No, because it's basically a chicken laying an egg is our equivalent of ovulating, and we don't need a
Mm.
man around to ovulate. So,
Oh, I love that. What a great
yeah,
education.
it just means the eggs are not fertile. So don't think you can, stick them in an incubator and hatch them, or let a hen sit on them and hatch them, because they're not
So
going
if
to
you want
happen.
fertilized eggs, you need a rooster.
Exactly.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so what other pets do you have? Since I'm a pet, I love pets.
So we also have sheep, and so we have sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, ducks, and we now have one lone goose. We used to have more geese, but the coyotes got most of them.
Hmm.
Because geese are, and it's unfortunate that there's another horrible rumor, is that you can have geese as a guard animal, and that no, they're only going to be a guard animal against a real coward. Like somebody will see a goose chasing a chihuahua or something and be like, "Look, there's a goose." No, 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 no. The geese are very bossy, and so they will run at you, like with their wings spread out, looking super intimidating. But we used to have a children's camp here for 3 years, and I just used to always tell the kids, like, just flap your wings right back at them and show them you're bigger than they are, and they'll back off. And they did, from an 8-year-old child. And because unfortunately they will act like that with a coyote, and a coyote is not going to be deterred. A coyote's like, ha ha, and chomp,
Yeah.
you're dead.
How do you protect your other animals from coyotes?
We have fencing, we have guard dogs. We used to have guard llamas. We don't anymore, but we have guard dogs and really good fencing.
Hmm.
So, and with the geese, what happened was, and I don't, is that the geese would sometimes, the mama geese would go somewhere and make a nest, and they literally guarded that nest to the death, you know.
Hmm.
That's how
Yeah.
we lost all of our girls like that. And so we were left with 2 boys, and then one of the boys fell asleep on the pond and it froze.
Wow. That's crazy. You don't think that's possible? Oh,
No, you wouldn't. Like really, guy, how could you fall asleep out here?
I thought
Because
you were going to say drowned, and I was like, yeah.
no,
Right.
he froze. He froze into the pond. And so um I was looking out one morning and I'm like, Mike, I only see one goose and I see a white blob on the eyes. Can you go check that? And it was the dead goose. He had to take his chainsaw out there and cut it out of the
Oh,
ice.
oh no. Now, was your other
He
goose?
cut the ice, not the goose. He cut the
Yeah.
ice.
Was your other goose upset? Because I know sometimes animals can mourn. Yeah.
Yeah, especially geese. So, yeah, no, he was not he did not seem upset about losing the male. We did have a male goose one time though that just about starved herself to death when her partner died.
Oh.
Like I've never seen an animal so sad.
Hmm. So
So,
sad. Okay, so I totally distracted the conversation. So I want to go back to, you said you talked about it for 9 years about
mhm.
moving to a farm environment. So what was the final straw? Was it that you wanted a better life for your kids? What prompted that? And then how long did it take before you actually made the move?
Um, so we wanted the kids to have a more authentic life. We wanted them to have meaningful chores and to feel like I wanted real exercise. Like I didn't want to be going to the Y or whatever to exercise. I wanted to be outside doing things that were physical. Because that was real. Like you have to carry this 50-pound bag of feed into the barn. You have to do this stuff. And so we were talking about it. We looked at properties. We never found anything that we liked. And then 9/11 happened, and I saw so many flaws in our system of like mass producing food, and thought, wow, we're actually really lucky that those terrorists were going for drama rather than let's really hurt these people. Because if they would have flown those planes into like a spaghetti bowl, like where 3 interstates cross, like they would have destroyed our economy and our ability to get food. Like that would have been much, much, much worse. And so I felt like I felt like I saw what a fragile system we lived in. Um, and I also realized our oldest was 9 years old. And I said, we have been talking about this ever since she was born. If we are going to do it, or I'm sorry, our baby was 9. And I was like, and our oldest was 13. And I said, if we are ever going to do this, like, we got to do it now. There's not that much growing up that anybody has left to do. And so that's when we started looking very, very seriously. And within a couple of months, so like February was when we finally found a place that we fell in love with. And, we closed and moved out here in April, which was perfect because, like, that's when, our last frost date is April 15th. So, we could hit the ground running with the baby chicks and baby goats and the garden and calves and baby turkeys, baby ducks, everything.
Now, I know your husband works. Now, were you taking care of the kids, kind of staying home, or did you have a job and then you transitioned to running the farm?
At that time, I was a freelance journalist. And so I was working for newspapers and magazines. So I was working at home. So it was nobody cared where I was located physically. So it was super easy to just continue doing that when we moved to the farm.
So yeah, then you adapted and started. Did you finally say, I'm not doing both, I'm just going to focus on the farm stuff?
Um, everything just kind of gradually shifted. So being that I was a journalist, I had lots of friends who were journalists. Everybody kept saying, you need to write a book about this. You need to write a book about this. But I'm like, I don't know what to write. Like, I can't just put together a bunch of cute little stories about, what my goat did or whatever. And so I started a blog named after our farm, Antiquity Oaks. It's still out there. It was from 2006 to 2016, where it was just an online diary, about what we were doing and all of like, I chronicled all of our goat births on there and sheep births and everything that we were doing, everything we were failing at, when I had animals that were sick or died or whatever, I would write about that on there. And then people started asking me to teach them how to do stuff that we were doing. And at first it was like somebody would call and say, hi, so-and-so said, you know how to make cheese. Will you teach me? And I'm like, sure, come on over. And then the requests started to get so numerous. I was like, and it was taking a lot of time. And I was like, I should start like teaching actual classes. So I started teaching classes.
So
And then
it was like organic, no
Mhm,
pun
it did.
intended.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
say
cool.
that. Like
And then
this
you've
whole
written like, what did you say, 6 books? Did you
Yeah,
tell
I've
me
written
six?
6 books now.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I
that's
love how
2
it
of them.
just, yeah, I love that. And tell me about the books because they're different, right? Different stuff.
So the first book was called Homegrown and Handmade, and that publisher discovered me at the first Mother Earth News Fair in 2010 in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania. And it was basically the book I wish I had been able to find when I moved out here. And because all the books I read were written by people who had grown up on a farm, and they left out a lot of really important stuff because that they thought was like common sense that everybody knows this.
So it's like
Um,
a beginner's guide to if you want to move to a farm and you don't know what the heck you're doing.
mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, and it's all telling you instructional, except for I have sidebars in there, and they're called "I Wish I'd Known," and this is about all of our big mistakes that we made
Yeah.
because we
And I
didn't
love,
know
yeah,
better.
you had written to me that you made a lot of mistakes, but you never gave up.
Hmm.
And I love that. So, yeah. So, and then you have books that are specifically about like food, like making goat cheese, right?
Um, no, there's 5 of my 6 books have recipes in them. In
Okay.
fact, it's a huge part of it is the food and the recipes. And I say that I was like a food blogger on steroids, because I don't just tell you, like, if I'm going to tell you how to make a pizza, I don't start in the kitchen. I start in the garden. Like, this is how you grow the tomatoes to make your tomato sauce to put on the pizza. And then we start in the barn. Like, this is how you raise your goats to produce milk to make the mozzarella. And then, and then there's recipes for like the pizza sauce and the mozzarella. And then I'm telling you how to grow the vegetables to put on there, how to raise the pigs to put the pork on your pizza. Like, when we say homemade pizza, we're saying we grew it all ourselves, except for the wheat that went into the flour and the salt and the yeast. Like, that's the only thing we bought.
Yeah, I love that. So, and you told me your husband, and I don't know if it was specifically the goats or the farm thing, but you said he got on board. So tell me, was this more of it like you drove it and to make it happen, and he kind of just wanted you to be happy?
Well, we had the farm and he loved it. He had a full-time job, working at a college an hour away. So he was hardly here at all. He would leave in the morning, he's the one who was getting up before dawn. He would leave here first thing in the morning. And then most nights he would not get back until 10 or 11 o'clock at night because he also taught some evening classes. And he loved all the food and everything, but he really didn't know anything about what we were doing. If I said I need a new fence or I need a new goat-sized door in the barn, because the barn was made for horses, so it needed some adjustments, or I need a new chicken house built, like that's the kind of stuff he would do in the summer. He'd be walking through the barn to like go get his hammer when we were in the middle of goat birthing and say, what'd you get? Like he knew a doe was a girl and a buck was a boy. But, I used to joke, he doesn't know the difference between a pastern and a pasture, because a pastern is like the part of a goat's leg just above their hoof, and the pasture's where the goats play. And he would not have known. Like I said that for years before I even told him I was saying it. And he's like, yeah, what is a pastern?
Mm.
But then as our kids started leaving home, that's when it was like, because it was me and the girls, like everybody kind of had their thing. So the two girls and I were the ones who were really into the goats. And so we did all of the milking, the birthing, the clipping for shows, because the girls used to show goats. We were 100% took care of the goats. He knew nothing about them whatsoever. And so when the youngest left for college, it became obvious really fast, like, okay, you're going to have to learn at least how to milk the goats, because because I can't always be here, in the evening when it's time to milk them. I may have to go somewhere, have an appointment or something. So that's when we actually bought the milking machine, because he insisted his hands were too big to be able to milk the goats. And
Do you
let
think,
me just,
is milking goats easier or the same as milking cows?
it's different.
It's different. Okay.
Yeah. So
It's hard, right? To learn, but I mean, once you get the knack of it, I guess. I've
it's not,
seen
it's like,
on the movies where they're like, they try to do it. I can't remember what movie it is, but I know there's a funny movie where they're trying to like do the
yeah.
cow and can't get any milk out.
Yeah, it's just different. Like once you know how to do it, it's really easy. And I think it's one of those things kids learn fast. My daughter was a year after we moved out here, I was milking, because I was actually originally doing the goats 100% myself. And after we'd been here for a year, my youngest came out one day and when I was milking and said, "Hey, can I learn how to do that?" And I'm like, "Sure, knock yourself out." And so she sat down, and for the first week, I was just like biting my tongue because it was like painful to watch because she was so slow and but after the week, like once she got it, she was better at milking than me. I mean, like I said earlier, like, she could milk 20 goats in one sitting. And yeah, I mean, when we bought the machine, she was at first excited. And then I said, okay, well, when you use it, this is how you have to clean it. And she's like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm not doing that. So she just kept milking them all by hand, because then she could just stick the bucket into the dishwasher.
Yeah, love that. So, yeah, the thing that I love about your story is I feel like there was this kind of something within you that kept gnawing and you never gave up on it. You kept it kept coming back, even though it took 9 years. And then you finally went for it and followed your dream. So I love that. And so now would you say it's a bona fide business? Are you like earning money from what you do?
So now it's kind of pivoted. Like there was a time, so when the kids were home, there was a time when we were selling lamb and pork and beef and chicken and turkeys. And we used to be able to legally sell milk, and then the laws changed like 5 years ago. We sold goat milk soap, we sold breeding stock. So like it wasn't enough to replace my husband's income, but we're an LLC. The farm is a corporation. We sell our eggs in a grocery store because we have 80 hens, and so we're able to supply a grocery store.
And you probably get
And
some tax benefits from being a farm too, right? I know there are some, but I don't know
really
how it
just
works.
with the land,
Okay.
so that the land is taxed as agricultural, which is way, 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 way less than if we had 32 acres taxed as residential. Like I don't even want to think of like what the property tax would be every year if this was not taxed as agricultural land.
And do you have to have a certain amount of like, do you have to prove that you're farming on it to get that qualification?
Well, they drive by and they can see it.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
like there's animals everywhere, and so it's way beyond
Yeah.
pets and hobbies and
Yeah.
stuff. So, but yeah, we got a visit from the tax assessor when we first moved in. And yeah, and so he asked us, he's like, "So, what are you gonna do with all this land?"
Yeah. That's
We
so
had to
cool.
explain all that.
Yeah. And so you pivoted. What is some things have changed? So you
Yeah,
what
so what
I and we talked for a little while. I think we talked for like a half an hour before we pressed record. But what I love about you is that, and I'll say in the intro that we met in a group, but I think that you are just a constant learner. You're just a constant acquirer of knowledge, and you just want to stay. You're curious. You want to
Mhm.
stay interested. You want to stay challenged, and wherever that kind of takes you,
Yeah.
it's like an organic process for you. Like I said.
Exactly. Yeah. So we started having internships. We had interns on the farm. So we started to, as our children left, we started to think of where we wanted to go with this. And it's like, so do we want to get bigger? Like, do we want to sell more meat, more eggs? Do we want to become a certified dairy? Do we want to have a bigger goat milk soap business? Because any one of those things could be turned into a business of any size. And my husband teaches college. I actually also do teach college online for the University of Massachusetts in their sustainable ag program. And so we're both just natural teachers. So it seemed like, let's just turn this into a teaching farm. And that's where our focus is going to be, is on education. And so it started with more on-farm classes. We had a kids camp here for 3 summers. And then almost 4 years ago now is when I started doing online classes. And when we had the on-farm stuff, we had people coming here literally all the way from like New York and California and all other parts of the US for our classes. And since I started, and with a lot more people, like every time I would announce these things on Facebook or something, people would say, "When are you going to start doing online classes?" And so I knew like there was, because a lot of people, like if you have a farm already, you can't leave, like you don't have a farm sitter. You don't know anybody who can come over and milk your goats for you.
Yeah,
So
that's the one
having,
thing that I think it would be kind of confining if you like to travel and go do whatever you want to do. What's interesting is what makes me think is how COVID might change people, and how there might be more people that say, you know what, I want to leave the rat race. I would love to go make my own food, because you do think like you stay in the city and you can catch a disease that can kill you.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. I think it's at a time where maybe the country's ripe for it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of food insecurity right now. I heard some horribly sad stories like in April and May about, like people buying baby chicks and not knowing that they needed supplemental heat for the first month if they don't have a mama, and then the chicks just dying like
Mm.
within a few hours after they get them in their
Mm.
at home, because they didn't do their homework. They're just like, oh, we want to get chickens so we have eggs. but they didn't do any homework to even know how to keep the chicks alive for more than a few hours.
You'd
Um,
think that would be in the instructions when they came, because I
they
know you
don't
can
come
mail
with
order them, right?
instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you get them. You get them mail order. And I contacted, and when I started hearing this, I contacted some of the bigger hatcheries to talk to them about what was happening. And like the phone calls they were getting were just crazy. Like people were calling and saying, "Yeah, if I buy chicks now, when are they going to start laying eggs?" And it's like, close to 6 months. Like you're not going to be feeding yourself anytime soon.
Yeah, what's weird is we have some friends that have chickens and we go over there. What's weird for me, because we're such a society that's used to using the refrigerator for everything, and everything has to be in the refrigerator, and they just have their eggs sitting out. They go and get their eggs and they sit out. I don't know how long they leave them out. I would have to study that, but they don't go in the refrigerator. I was like, you go leave eggs out?
Yeah, it does shorten it. All it happens is it shortens their shelf life. So if you're going to use them, within a couple of weeks, that's perfectly fine. If they came straight from the nest and have not been washed. Now, according to US law, you have to wash eggs to sell them in the store. So you can't do that. Once they've been washed and refrigerated, they have to stay in the refrigerator at
Right.
that point.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So this is a totally random question, but it's just because I'm a grandma and I know you have a grandson. Um, so did you feel like, was it good that you had something that you were really passionate about, like as your kids transitioned and left home? Because they're now all gone.
Hmm. Oh,
And
yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I
I've
bet they
seen.
love, that's what I try to tell people is you
Mhm.
need something to fill your life up, because your kids, first of all, you can be a great role model. They have you to see like how vital you can be as you get older. And the kids want their parents to have a passion and not be like in their stuff all the time. Right?
Uh-huh.
I think
Yeah.
it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know. I've seen so many other women who were 100% like that was 100% their life was their children, They were the room mom and, driving to soccer practice and and their kids leave and they're like they don't know what to do and they're just floundering and trying all sorts of different things and they try one thing for a few months. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'll try something else. And it's like, and that did not happen to me at all. It was like, oh,
Start
my kid.
preparing in advance. That's
Yeah.
the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had so much stuff that I was already doing. I was writing the books. And I mean, like, that was the hard part for me was that I didn't have help on the farm anymore. Um,
Yes.
so it was like losing a valuable employee.
That's right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, now I've got to fit in chores with my writing. My first.
How do you think they'll apply what they've learned from growing up on a farm, even though your one was 13, so less exposure, but still great exposure. How do you think that will help them? And do you think they'll end up on farms someday?
Both of my daughters say that they will, um, because they want goats and chickens, and a garden. But the other thing is that I think it gave them a work ethic that you just don't see today. Like my oldest daughter is an electrical engineer and she's the division director for her company in in this part of Southern California. And she just is so frustrated by some of her employees' lack of responsibility. She's like, I
Yeah.
don't understand.
Who probably never had chores and were given
Right.
everything they wanted. So basically, you got what you wanted because you wanted that for your kids. And I think
Mhm.
that's an amazing like legacy to leave.
Yeah, I think it
So
made them very responsible. And for
yeah.
the youngest, she totally credits growing up on the farm for her becoming a science nerd, and ultimately getting a PhD in bioanalytical chemistry and doing disease research and
Yeah. I love
what
that.
she does now as a professional.
Yeah. So I have two questions as we close out. My first question is easy, and my second question is a little more thought provoking. But my first question is, how long do goats live?
Oh, so this is the two-part answer. So your does are gonna usually live to be like 12 to 15 years old. Our oldest so far has made it to 16 and a half. And she was in great shape, like right up until the end. Like one day we
Kind of like
just walked out.
dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was, I mean, one day we just walked out there and she was curled up like she was napping. And I mean, like that was it. Like,
That's
oh my
really
gosh,
sweet.
that's so sweet.
Oh,
What a wonderful way to go when you're
yeah.
16 and a half. Um, Bucks, however, if you get 9 or 10 at the most, testosterone is a dangerous drug, as someone once said to me, because the boys, um, during breeding season, they forget to eat, they want to fight with each other. It take really, it's, you would think that the does, they're growing babies and milking, for 12 months, like their whole life, that's what they're doing. um but the boys do not live as long. I don't think I've ever heard of a buck living past 10.
Interesting.
And mine have, my oldest buck was 8 or 9 when he died.
Yeah, you know what? This also comes up as a memory. When I was like a teenager, my sister had a friend, and she was babysitting goats. So she knew these people, and they went away, and she was responsible for like going and feeding their goats while they were gone. It was like they were only gone for like 3 or 4 days or something. So I remember she called my sister because one of the goats was acting really weird, and it kept going in a circle, and it wouldn't go, it would only go to the left. It was like this really weird thing. And so she called the vet, and I remember we took my parents' red station wagon and helped her take this goat to the vet, and the goat died.
Listeriosis.
The
Listeriosis.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like it was just going in circles and circles and circles. And I remember it pooped in our back of our station wagon. But
Mhm.
that's crazy, because I remember this. It was like the goat seemed normal. It would seem normal, other than it wouldn't stop. Like we would try to stand in its way, and it would like
Mhm.
go around us. That's like my only experience with goats. And it was so sad, because I'm an animal lover. I collect all
Yeah.
the stray whatever.
Yeah.
And like it was there in our car, and then it died. So what
Mhm.
causes that?
Listeriosis.
It's a
And
goat
that is,
disease?
yeah, it's actually zoonotic.
What's that?
And meaning that humans can get it.
Ooh.
Um, Listeriosis is caused by Listeria monocytogenes. And it is, and that's
It's
why
lethal, like you can't treat it? Or
it's neurological, which is why the
oh.
nickname for it is circling disease. That's why as soon as
Mm.
you said it was walking in a circle, I'm like, oh, this is easy.
I knew you'd know,
Yeah.
because I mean it, because the vet said what it was, and that
Hmm.
was the sign, was a circling thing.
Yeah. And if you can start treatment like really early, like the minute we've had one goat with it, and
Is it
and
like a parasite that they get?
no, it's a bacteria, and so
uh
you can treat it with antibiotics, but the treatment has to start really really fast. And in fact, the one goat that we had it, we walked out to the barn one morning, and she couldn't even stand. She had her body curled into a C shape, and her eyes were twitching.
mm.
And I called and said, we've got a goat that's got something neurological going on. We're on our way down there right now. Because you can do that with the emergency vet clinic. You just give them a heads up you're coming. And we got her down there, and they were able to start treatment fast, immediately. And so she was saved. But I mean,
Yeah,
hours
this is
are.
like, and I don't know if they know more now, but this is like 1975
Mhm.
probably, or so it was a long time ago. So, and then my last question for you, because this is all fascinating. You've been so never had anybody like you on my on the episode on the podcast. So you talk about making so many different mistakes, and how you never stopped, you kept going. And I'd love for you to share what you think was maybe perhaps your biggest mistake, that, and maybe, I don't know if you ever thought about throwing in the towel. It doesn't sound like you're that kind of person, but what was your
Twice.
biggest lesson, I think, through this?
There were two times where I really felt like giving up. And The second, I'll tell you the story about the second time because it was actually related to one of my, I don't know, hopefully I can tell you the story without starting to cry. It was one of my goats who was carrying 5 kids, and that, which is very unusual. Usually goats have twins, sometimes they'll have triplets or quads. And this goat she had 5, and they were 2 kids trying to come out at the same time. And so I stuck my hand inside and pushed one back, and would try to push one back and pull one. And every time I pulled, the head would flip back over the body. And I kept trying to fix the position and pull it out, but it kept going. The head kept flipping back. And I didn't have the equipment that I needed to be able to keep the head forward while I was pulling on the legs. And so we said, all right, we've got to take her to the vet. And so we drove her down there. It was a 2-hour drive to get down there. And they delivered all 5 kids. All 5 kids were alive. And then the doe went and she just like, it after the 5th kid, she just went and she stood in the corner. And I was like, something is wrong with her. And the vet was like, oh, she's just mad. And I'm like, no, like, I'm like, this is a goat that was born on my farm. She's my baby. She was like in my lap on the way to the vet in the car with her massive belly. And they're like, oh no, she's fine. She's fine. You can take them all home. And so we did. And this was, we got home at like 4:00 in the morning, and I went to bed, and 2 hours later, my husband came in to tell me she was dead.
Mm.
And I was so mad at myself. And that's one of the things that nobody prepares you for that. Like, in our modern world, we don't hardly ever have to deal with death, and it happens in a hospital. It happens in behind closed doors. You hear somebody died, but you are not usually in a position where you feel responsible for something like that. So it's not, and I think this is one of the things, like, I ask on my Facebook page, every now and then, like, what's the hardest thing to deal with? And invariably, a lot of people are going to say when an animal dies. And at some point you accept the fact that, like, death is a natural part of life. But I want all of my goats to be that 16-and-a-half-year-old that I find that looks like she's sleeping in the pasture,
And you've got to think too that, like, she probably would have died if you didn't intervene and take her to
Right.
the vet. And
Right.
so, it was her time, but it's heartbreaking because they're just, I know
Yeah.
they're like pets, and they're like
Yeah,
little people.
they are. And goats are just so personable. Goats were actually domesticated before dogs. So
Mm.
they're very, very personable. They love people so much. And like I said, this was a goat that was born on my farm. And so she really was like my baby.
How old was she?
And she was 8 years old. And I found out that she died because when I called the vet and I told him that she died, the vet was like, there is no way she should have died. Can you please bring her back? Like, we want to do a necropsy and see why. And she had died from a ruptured uterus.
Mm.
And that was horrible. Like, the whole drive, because it's a 2-hour drive. So, like, the whole drive back down there, and I was by myself, like 2 hours down there, 2 hours back. I was like, I can't do this anymore,
Yeah, and I bet the vet felt horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hate that lesson to be on your goat, but the
Mm-hmm.
vet probably won't make that mistake again.
Yeah.
And
So,
yeah, listen to your intuition. That's just another example. Yeah.
yep.
Well, thank you so much for this delightful time that we got to chat and spend together. And I look forward to hanging out with you more in our group that we're in.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
And I'll share your website, the books that you've written, all this stuff, so many good things that people can follow up with, and maybe order some stuff online. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own Not Your Average life.